A few hours before my son's wedding, I found my husband in the living room with his fiancée. My heart stopped. I was about to say something when I saw my son, Garrett, standing in the hallway. His face showed no emotion. "Mom," he whispered, "I already know. And it's worse than you think." The day of my son's wedding was supposed to be the happiest of my life. Instead, it became the day I publicly detonated 25 years of lies and watched my husband's entire world burn to the ground, right there in front of 300 astonished guests. That morning, I was already wide awake at 5 a.m. Sleep was impossible. I told myself it was just nerves, the kind any mother feels when her son gets married. I sat right here in my home office, staring at spreadsheets on my computer screen. I run a small accounting business, nothing flashy, but it put our son, Garrett, through college and covered all those little extras Arthur's salary couldn't quite reach. The numbers were just a blur. My mind was somewhere else entirely. Outside, it was still dark and quiet, but I could already picture the scene unfolding in our backyard in just a few hours. White chairs, perfectly arranged on the lawn. I'd spent all spring tending to the rose-draped archway Arthur had put up, nurturing those tiny buds into full bloom. I'd personally checked the string lights 3 times, making sure not a single bulb was out. Everything had to be perfect. Our son, our Garrett, deserved a perfect day. 25 years of marriage to Arthur. 23 years of raising Garrett. I had poured my entire life into this family. I was the steady hand, the planner, the one who remembered dentist appointments and birthdays, who made sure the bills were paid on time. Arthur, he was the charmer, the life of the party, the one everyone loved. I was the foundation he stood on. And for a long time, that was enough for me. But lately, something had felt off. A quiet distance had crept between us. It was in the way he'd stop talking when I walked into a room, the way his phone was always angled away from me. When I'd ask if something was wrong, he'd just laugh it off. "Stressed at work, honey," he'd say. "Big promotion on the line." What else could I do? You don't throw away 25 years of history over a feeling. So, I chose to believe him. Then, the click of the office door snapped me back to the present. It was Garrett, my son, standing there in his pajamas, a coffee mug in his hand. He looked absolutely exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. At 23, he had my practical nature, but his father's handsome features. "Mom, you've been up for hours," he said, his voice quiet. "The wedding isn't until 4. "Just want everything to be perfect for my boy," I replied, trying for a cheerful smile as I closed my laptop. "Your father's still sleeping." "He left early," Garrett said, an odd note in his voice. He walked over and sat on the edge of my desk, suddenly looking much younger than his years. Something about picking up a gift for Brenda's parents. I frowned. That was news to me. "Mom," he said, hesitating. "Can I ask you something?" I turned my chair to face him fully. In the harsh light of my desk lamp, his worry was plain as day. "What's eating at you, sweetheart?" He took a deep breath. "Do you think Brenda really loves me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Brenda. His fiancée. Ambitious, beautiful, a junior architect from a family with old money and connections. On the surface, she was everything we'd ever wanted for Garrett. But I'd had my own private doubts. I'd seen the way her eyes would sometimes glaze over when Garrett talked about his passions, the way she'd check her phone during family dinners. "Why would you ask that, honey? It's your wedding day." "I know, and maybe it's just cold feet," he mumbled, staring into his coffee. "But sometimes, when she looks at me, it feels like she's looking right through me, like I'm just a box she needed to check off on her way to the perfect life." He paused. "And lately, she's been spending so much time with Dad. They're always talking about finances, investments. She says he's mentoring her." I wanted to tell him about the things I'd noticed, too. How Arthur's eyes followed Brenda around the room. How he always found excuses to help her with her coat or refill her drink. How he knew exactly how she liked her coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream, without ever having to ask. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Wedding jitters are normal, honey. Marriage is the biggest step you'll ever take." "It's not just jitters, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain that terrified me. I think she's in love with someone else. I froze, my blood turning to ice. What makes you say that? Little things, he whispered. The way she lights up when Dad calls. How she always asks about him first when she comes over. Yesterday, I saw them in the garden just talking. And the way he looked at her, it wasn't how a father-in-law should look at his son's fiancée. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. I forced my voice to stay steady. Garrett, that's a very serious accusation. I know, he said, his shoulders slumping. And I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong. Before I could answer, the door swung open again. It was Arthur. He was already dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks, looking immaculate as always. There are my two favorite people, he boomed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He seemed surprised to see Garrett there. Big day, son. You should be getting ready. He turned his attention to me. And you, Lorraine, you're going to exhaust yourself. He continued, Brenda just called. She's going to stop by around 10 to discuss some last-minute details about the seating chart. I saw Garrett's expression tighten. What details? He asked. Oh, just making sure her parents aren't sitting next to your Uncle Robert after the political argument last Christmas, Arthur said with a breezy wave of his hand. You know how particular her family is. We should probably discuss it privately. Politics and all that. Of course, Garrett said, his voice flat. Can't have the wrong people sitting together. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I watched my husband and my son, and I knew deep in my gut that Garrett wasn't wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. After Arthur and Garrett left my office, a cold dread settled over me. I was supposed to have a final call with the caterer at 10:30, a call I had been planning for weeks. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, and called them. I told them I had a family emergency and needed to reschedule. It was a lie. The truth was, I had cleared my entire morning. I couldn't shake Garrett's words, or the sick feeling Arthur's fake cheerfulness had given me. Something was happening in my house today. And for the first time in 25 years, I intended to find out what it was. I spent the next 2 hours pretending to be busy. I tidied up the kitchen, which was already spotless. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room table. Every sound made me jump. Every passing car made my heart hammer against my ribs. It felt like I was an actor in a play, going through the motions of being the happy mother of the groom, while my insides were churning with anxiety. At exactly 10 o'clock, a sleek white BMW pulled into our driveway. Brenda's car. I watched from the kitchen window as she got out. Even in simple jeans and a blouse, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She walked up to the front door with the easy confidence of someone who knew she belonged. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I slipped out the back door and crept around the side of the house, crouching behind the large hydrangea bushes that lined our living room windows. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in my own home. But the need to know, the need to either confirm my fears or put them to rest, was overwhelming. Through the large bay window, I could see them. Arthur had let her in, and they were standing by the fireplace, the spot where we took family photos every Christmas. He was handing her a drink. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language spoke volumes. They were standing close, too close. His hand was resting on the small of her back. It was a casual gesture, one that could be easily explained away, but it lingered there just a second too long. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. 25 years. We had built a life in this house. We had read bedtime stories to Garrett on that very couch. We had hosted countless family holidays in that room. And now my husband was standing there caressing another woman, our son's fiancée, on our son's wedding day. I was about to stand up, to storm inside and confront them right then and there. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the wedding. All I cared about was the searing betrayal I was witnessing. But then I noticed a movement in the upstairs hallway, a shadow in the reflection on the glass. I looked closer. It was Garrett. He was standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them too. The sight of him, so still and broken, stopped me in my tracks. This wasn't just my pain. It was his. Downstairs, things had escalated. Brenda's hand was now on Arthur's chest. She was leaning into him, her head tilted back, a smile playing on her lips. She said something and he laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Light, genuine, happy, the way he used to laugh with me back when we were young and everything felt possible. In that moment, I watched my husband transform into someone I didn't recognize. Someone alive in a way he hadn't been with me for a very, very long time. Then his hands were in her hair and they were kissing. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind you see in movies. My vision went red. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the house, ready to tear the door off its hinges, ready to scream until my lungs gave out. And then a hand grabbed my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Garrett. He had slipped out of the house and come to find me. His face was pale, ashen, but his eyes were blazing with a cold, hard determination I had never seen before. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice tight. "Not yet. Garrett, this is..." I choked on the words. I couldn't even say it. "I know what it is," he said, his voice steady, though I could see his hands were shaking. "Mom, I've known for weeks." Weeks. The word came out as a strangled whisper. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, who now looked at me with the eyes of a man who had seen too much. We were still crouched behind the hydrangeas. The beautiful flowers I'd been so proud of now serving as a blind for our family's destruction. Inside the house, my husband and my son's fiancée had moved from the fireplace to the couch. I couldn't bear to look. I didn't want to believe it at first, Garrett said, his voice low and urgent. I kept making excuses for them. "He's just being friendly. She's just nervous about joining the family." But it kept happening. The lingering looks, the private conversations, the way. "Mom," the way she lit up whenever he was around. He corrected himself. The slip of the tongue, a painful reminder of a life that no longer existed. He was supposed to be getting a new mother figure, not a rival. "I mean, Brenda, why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and a strange, protective anger. He shouldn't have had to carry this alone. "Because I needed proof," he said, his jaw tight. And because he looked at me, his eyes far older than his 23 years, I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly as he tapped the screen. "I hired someone," he confessed. "You what?" "I'm not stupid, Mom. After I saw them having lunch together a month ago, a lunch Dad told me was a business meeting, and she told me was a shopping trip with her friends, I knew I wasn't crazy. I needed to know the truth." He handed me the phone. "I hired an investigator." My breath hitched. "An investigator? Garrett? The money?" "Don't worry about the money," he said grimly. "It was worth every penny." The first photo on the screen showed Arthur and Brenda entering the Riverside Hotel downtown. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday afternoon when Arthur was supposedly at a regional sales conference. The second photo showed them leaving together 2 hours later, looking flushed and disheveled. "There are 17 different occasions," Garrett said quietly as I scrolled through a gallery of betrayal. Photos of them at dimly lit restaurants across town. Photos of them in a private parking garage, pressed against the side of Arthur's car. Photos of them laughing, holding hands, living a completely different life behind our backs. I felt sick. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a calculated, long-term affair. I started to stand up again, a fresh wave of rage washing over me. "We're going to stop this," I said, my voice like steel. "Right now." "No," Garrett's voice was sharp, pulling me back down. "Mom, trust me. I have a plan." "A plan?" "Garrett, this is insane. We can't just let the wedding." "We absolutely can," he interrupted, his voice carrying an authority I'd never heard before. "And we will." "Mom, think about it. If we confront them now, what happens?" "They'll deny it. They'll twist it. Dad will say, 'You're being hysterical, you're misinterpreting things.' Brenda will cry and play the victim. They'll turn it all around on us." He was right. I could already hear Arthur's smooth, placating voice. "Lorraine, you're overreacting. She's a nervous young woman, and I was just offering her some fatherly advice." "So, what are you suggesting?" I whispered, my anger giving way to a cold, terrifying clarity. Garrett's smile was a chilling, unfamiliar thing. Public humiliation, he said, the words hanging in the air between us. Complete and total destruction of their reputations. Legal consequences. We don't just end this, Mom. We make sure they can never, ever do this to anyone again. I stared at my son. When had he become so calculating, so ruthless? Then I looked back through the window. I saw my husband, the man I had loved and trusted for a quarter of a century, begin to unbutton Brenda's blouse on the couch where we had built our family. And in that moment, I knew the woman I used to be, the forgiving, understanding wife, was gone. She had died right there in the dirt behind the flowers she had so carefully planted. Tell me the plan, I said. That evening was one of the strangest of my life. Arthur came home acting like nothing had happened, asking about the final arrangements with the caterer. Brenda had left hours earlier, and he was the picture of the doting husband and proud father. He talked about his speech for the reception, about how proud he was of Garrett. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. I just nodded and smiled, a hollow shell of myself, while inside I was screaming. After Arthur went to bed, Garrett and I met in my office. The door was locked. The blinds were drawn. It felt like a war room. And in many ways, it was. Spread across my desk were the beginnings of an evidence file that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Talk to me about this investigator, I said, studying a surveillance photo that made my stomach churn. Her name is Beverly, Garrett said. Beverly Reed. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Beverly. My sister Beverly. Garrett nodded. I didn't know who else to call. I knew she was a cop for 20 years before she retired and started her own PI business. I knew she was smart, and I knew she would be discreet. He looked at me a little sheepish. I also knew she never really liked Dad. I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a sob. My younger sister Beverly. We were close, but I hadn't told her about the growing distance with Arthur. I'd been too proud, too ashamed to admit my marriage might be failing. I'll call her, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Beverly picked up on the second ring. Lorraine, it's past midnight. Is everything okay? No, Bev. Nothing is okay. And then the dam broke. I told her everything, what Garrett had suspected, what we had seen that morning, the photos. I cried ugly, gasping sobs for the first time all day. She listened patiently, her voice calm, steady on the other end of the line. There was no shock, no surprise, just a grim acceptance. I'm not surprised, Lori, she said softly when I was finished. I've seen the way he looks at that girl. I was hoping I was wrong. Garrett told me about the photos, I said, wiping my eyes. What else do you have? More than you want to know, probably, she said, her voice turning professional. I've been tracking their movements for 3 weeks. They meet twice a week, regular as clockwork at the Riverside Hotel. He pays in cash always. They have lunch at fancy restaurants he'd never take you to. Last week, he took her to Tiffany and Company. I felt that hot flash of rage again. Our money. The money I managed so carefully. The money that was supposed to be for our retirement, for our future. And Lori, Beverly's voice was gentle. Now there's more. Something bigger. I've been looking into Arthur's finances, trying to figure out where all this cash for the hotel rooms and gifts is coming from. He's been sloppy. What did you find? I asked, dreading the answer. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It's not just Brenda, she said, her voice heavy. This isn't the first time. I found a series of regular monthly payments going back 15 years, always to the same person, a woman named Victoria Sterling. The name meant nothing to me. Who is that? I did some digging. She was a junior associate at his old firm back when Garrett was a kid. She left abruptly about 15 years ago. The payments started a few months after she left. Beverly took a deep breath. Lorraine, she has a daughter. A 15-year-old girl named Haley. I ran a background check. The father isn't listed on the birth certificate, but I'd bet my license that Arthur is her father. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I couldn't breathe. A daughter. A whole other child. 15 years of lies. 15 years of a double life. The secret trips, The unexplained expenses, the emotional distance, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "I have to know for sure, Bev," I whispered. "I know," she said. "I'll handle it. But Lorraine, you need to be prepared. When this comes out, it's going to be a nuclear bomb." "I know," I said, my voice cold and hard. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The 24 hours leading up to the wedding were a blur of calculated deception. I moved through the preparations like a ghost, my body on autopilot while my mind raced. I smiled at relatives. I approved the final seating chart with the wedding planner. I even helped Arthur with his tie, my fingers brushing against the silk fabric while I imagined tightening it around his neck. Every interaction was a performance. Every polite word was a lie. Beverly worked quickly. She was a professional, and this was now personal. She told me she had a contact at a private lab. "It's a long shot, Lori, but if we can get a clean DNA sample from Arthur, we can get a preliminary, non-legal comparison against a sample from the girl." That night, after Arthur was asleep, snoring softly beside me in the bed we had shared for a quarter of a century, I crept out of the room. My heart pounded with every creak of the floorboards. I went into the bathroom and took his toothbrush from its holder. My hand was shaking so much I almost dropped it. It felt like the ultimate violation. But what was this compared to the violations he had committed against me, against our family? I placed it carefully in a plastic bag and left it in the mailbox for Beverly to pick up before dawn. The next day, while the house buzzed with the chaotic energy of florists and photographers, Beverly called. "I've got more on the money," she said, her voice grim. "It's worse than we thought." We met in my car, parked on the street from the house, the only place I felt safe to talk. She opened a laptop and turned it towards me. On the screen was a spreadsheet, a dizzying array of numbers and dates. "I did a full workup on your joint accounts, your retirement funds, everything," she said, pointing to a highlighted column. "Look at the pattern. For years, Arthur has been making regular cash withdrawals. Small amounts, 500 here, 700 there, never more than 1,000 at a time, always from different branches." "I thought that was for his hobby," I said numbly. "He always told me he was investing in rare coins, something that required cash transactions." "Another lie." "His hobby was named Brenda," Beverly said dryly. "He used the cash for the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the gifts, that Tiffany's necklace. He paid for half of it in cash. But that's not the worst part." She clicked on another tab. "He's been borrowing against your 401k. I stared at the screen. There it was in black and white. A series of loans taken out against the retirement account I had so diligently contributed to from my own small business. The account that was supposed to be our safety net, our security for old age. He had drained nearly $60,000 from it over the past 18 months. "How?" I whispered. "He would have needed my signature." "He forged it," Beverly said quietly. "I compared the signature on the loan documents to your signature on your tax filings. It's a good forgery, but it's not yours." I felt a wave of nausea. This went beyond cheating. This was theft. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was systematically dismantling our future, piece by piece, to fund his sordid affair. He was stealing from me, from the college fund we built, from the life we were supposed to share. He was gambling with my entire future. "And Brenda?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She's no innocent victim," Beverly said, her eyes hard. "I'll get to her. But first, there's something else." She hesitated, then handed me a large manila envelope. "The preliminary DNA results came back this morning." My hands began to shake as I opened it. I scanned the page, the scientific jargon blurring together until I found the conclusion at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity 99.999%. I stared at the words until they burned into my memory. Haley Sterling was Arthur's daughter. 15 years. 15 years of loving him, trusting him, building a life with him while he had another child, another family, hidden in the shadows. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, the leather cool against my hot forehead. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange, terrifying calm settled over me. The grief was still there, a massive, gaping wound in my chest. But now it was accompanied by something else. A cold, hard resolve. He wasn't just going to lose his wife. He was going to lose everything. Sitting in the car with my sister, the flimsy piece of paper in my hand felt heavier than a tombstone. It was the death certificate for my marriage, for the life I thought I had. A 15-year-old daughter. The words echoed in the silent car. How did you find her? I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. Beverly's expression was a mixture of pity and professional resolve. It started with the payments. Once I had Victoria Sterling's name, it wasn't hard to track her down. She lives just 2 towns over, Lori, 20 minutes from here. 20 minutes. For 15 years, he had been living a secret life, just a short drive away. How many times had he told me he was working late? How many business dinners had he attended? How many weekend golf trips had he taken? My mind reeled as I mentally scrolled back through years of excuses and lies, each one now taking on a sinister new meaning. I went by the house yesterday morning, Beverly continued, her voice soft. Posed as a market researcher. Victoria answered the door, and behind her I saw the girl, Haley. Lori, she looks just like him. Same eyes, same smile. It's unmistakable. I pictured it, a teenage girl, an innocent in all of this, who looked like my husband, a sister my son never knew he had. The thought was so surreal, so monstrous, that I couldn't fully process it. My family wasn't just broken, it was a fraud. It was a carefully constructed lie that I had unknowingly helped maintain for more than half my life. Does Victoria know about me, about Garrett? I asked. I can't say for sure, Beverly admitted. But from the way she lives, nice house in a good school district, but no flashy career, it's clear Arthur is her primary source of financial support. She has every reason to keep things quiet. He wasn't just paying child support, Lori. He was funding her entire life with my money. With our money, the money from my accounting business, the money from our joint savings, the money he had stolen from our retirement. The betrayal was so deep, so multi-layered. It felt like I was drowning. It was a systematic plundering of my life's work, my trust, and my future. I handed the DNA report back to Beverly. Put it with the rest of the evidence, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I was numb. The shock was so profound, it had short-circuited my ability to feel anything but a cold, heavy emptiness. I thought about this girl, Haley. What kind of man tells his daughter that he can't acknowledge her? What kind of man raises one child in the light while keeping another hidden in the dark? The cruelty of it, not just to me and Garrett, but to this innocent girl, was staggering. What about Brenda? I asked, needing to shift my focus, to latch onto a target for the rage that was beginning to thaw the ice in my veins. You said there was more about her. Beverly nodded, her expression hardening again. Right, Brenda. Let's talk about the fiancé. She turned the laptop back towards me and opened a new file. She's not just sleeping with your husband. She's been embezzling from her law firm. The words took a moment to register. What? She's a junior partner at a small, but prestigious firm downtown, Beverly explained, pulling up documents that looked like internal financial reports. She's been padding expense reports, creating fake invoices for non-existent consultants, and funneling the money into a private bank account. It's not huge amounts at a time, but it's consistent. Over the past year, she's stolen over $200,000. My jaw dropped. $200,000? And I can trace some of that money directly back to gifts for Arthur, Beverly said, showing me a wire transfer, followed by a credit card statement showing a purchase of a $1,000 watch. She was stealing from her partners to buy gifts for her lover, who was stealing from his wife to buy gifts for her. It's the most disgustingly perfect circle of deceit I've ever seen. So Brenda wasn't just a homewrecker. She was a criminal, a thief, and she was about to marry my son to bring her corruption and her lies into the heart of what was left of my family. The numbness in my chest was gone, replaced by a white-hot fury. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about protecting my son. This was about justice. This was about making sure these two people faced the consequences for every single lie, every single dollar, every single broken promise. Okay, I said, looking my sister in the eye. The plan for the wedding. Let's go over it one more time. I want it to be perfect. The knowledge of Brenda's embezzlement added a dark and criminal layer to the already staggering betrayal. It shifted everything. This was no longer just a messy, heartbreaking domestic drama. It was a conspiracy of fraud and theft perpetrated by the two people who should have been closest to us. How did you get all this? I asked Beverly, gesturing towards the damning financial documents on her laptop screen. We were still in my car, the air thick with the scent of conspiracy and stale coffee. Brenda's not as smart as she thinks she is, Beverly said with grim satisfaction. She got sloppy. And I have friends in law enforcement who are willing to pull a few strings when they heard the story. A friend of mine in the fraud division took one look at these patterns and knew exactly what he was seeing. She pointed to the screen. She was moving the money through a shell corporation she set up under her mother's maiden name. It was amateur hour. I thought about Brenda's parents, the Holloways. They were pillars of the community. Her father was a respected judge. Her mother sat on the board of 3 different charities. They moved in circles where reputation was everything. They believed their daughter was a brilliant rising star who was marrying into a good, stable family. They had no idea their golden child was a thief and that the stable family she was marrying into was a house of cards built on lies. The public humiliation was going to destroy them too. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity for them. They were innocent collateral damage. But that feeling was quickly extinguished by the fire of my own betrayal. So Arthur is stealing our retirement money to buy gifts for his mistress, I summarized, the words tasting like poison, and Brenda is stealing from her company to buy gifts for my husband, her lover, who is also her future father-in-law. I shook my head in disbelief. You can't make this stuff up. It gets better, Beverly said, a wry twist to her lips. Some of the money Arthur took from your 401k? He invested it in a cash money real estate deal that Brenda recommended. Let me guess, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. The deal was a bust. The deal never existed, Beverly confirmed. The money went straight into that secret account of hers. She was stealing from him, too. He was so blinded by his own ego and infatuation that he never even saw it. I had to laugh. It was a bitter, joyless sound. My brilliant, charming husband, the man who always thought he was the smartest person in the room, was being played for a fool by a 20-something embezzler. It was almost poetic. We spent another hour going over the evidence Beverly had compiled. She had everything: bank statements, surveillance photos, hotel receipts paid in cash, wire transfers, forged loan documents, and now a complete file on Brenda's criminal activities that was ready to be handed over to the district attorney. And of course, the DNA report, the smoking gun that proved 15 years of deception. I looked at the file, at the neat tabs and organized pages that represented the complete demolition of my life. 25 years of marriage reduced to a stack of incriminating documents on the passenger seat of my car. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. So profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Bev, can we do this? I whispered. Can we really stand up in front of 300 people and do this to them? To our family. Beverly reached over and put her hand on my arm. Her grip was firm, grounding. Lori, listen to me, she said, her voice serious. What choice do you have? If you confront them privately, they will lie. They will manipulate you. They will turn Garrett against you. They will deny until you start to think you're the crazy one. I've seen it 100 times. She was right. I knew she was right. Arthur was a master manipulator. He could charm his way out of anything. This way, she continued, there is no escape. There is no room for lies. There is only the truth, presented in front of everyone they have ever tried to impress. It's not just about revenge, Lori. It's about consequences. Brenda needs to go to jail. Arthur needs to be held accountable, not just for the affairs, but for the financial fraud he's committed against you. This is the only way to make sure the lies stop for good. I took a deep breath, the stale air of the car filling my lungs. I thought of Garrett, his pale, determined face. I thought of Haley, the daughter I never knew. I thought of the 25 years I had given to a man who had been lying to me from the very beginning. You're right, I said, my voice clear and steady again. It's the only way. I started the car. Let's go. We have a wedding to prepare for. The final hours before the wedding were the most surreal of my life. I went back into the house and resumed my role as the calm, happy mother of the groom. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. I saw myself laughing with my cousins, complimenting my sister-in-law on her dress, and reassuring the caterer that everything looked wonderful. On the inside, I was a coiled spring of tension and grief. But on the outside, I was the picture of maternal pride. Arthur was in his element, working the crowd of early arrivals, accepting congratulations with a broad, confident smile. He pulled me aside at one point, his arm wrapping around my waist. "You look beautiful, Lorraine," he said, his voice a low murmur in my ear. "Isn't this a perfect day?" I looked up at him, into the eyes of the man I had loved for more than half my life, and felt nothing but a cold, empty void. I smiled back. "Perfect," I said. My son Garrett was a mirror of my own forced composure. He greeted his friends, posed for photos with his groomsmen, and played his part flawlessly. But whenever his eyes met mine across the crowded lawn, I could see the same steel resolve reflected there. We were in this together. We were soldiers waiting for the signal to attack. The plan was simple, and Beverly had rehearsed it with us until we knew it by heart. She had arrived early, disguised as a member of the catering staff, her professional audiovisual equipment hidden in plain sight. She had connected her laptop to the large projection screen that we had rented, which was supposedly for a sentimental photo slideshow of Garrett growing up. No one suspected a thing. She had a small remote control in her pocket. When the time came, all she had to do was press a single button. I had my own role to play. I had prepared the divorce papers with my lawyer a week ago, a fact I had kept secret, even from Garrett. They were signed and notarized, sitting in a sealed envelope in my purse. I also had a USB drive containing copies of every single piece of evidence Beverly had gathered. One way or another, my marriage would officially end today. There was no going back. I wasn't just planning for a confrontation. I was planning for the first day of the rest of my life. At 5 minutes to 4, I took my seat in the front row. The string quartet began to play, and the wedding party made their entrance. Arthur sat beside me, squeezing my hand with what looked like genuine affection. I felt a tremor of revulsion, but forced myself not to pull away. Brenda appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white lace. She looked radiant, beautiful, and utterly fraudulent. She beamed at the crowd, then her eyes found Arthur in the front row. For a split second, a look passed between them. A look of shared secrets, of triumphant conspiracy. They thought they had won. They thought they were just minutes away from cementing their perfect, deceitful future. Garrett stood at the altar, his face an unreadable mask. As Brenda joined him, he took her hand, his expression never wavering. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning the faces until they landed on me. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The minister began the ceremony with the usual words about love, commitment, and fidelity. The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. I wondered if Arthur and Brenda were even listening, or if they were already planning their next secret rendezvous. The ceremony proceeded. They exchanged vows they didn't mean, promises they had already broken 100 times over. My stomach churned with every lie that fell from their lips. Finally, the minister reached the critical moment. He smiled benevolently at the crowd. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." A hush fell over the 300 guests. This was it. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I could feel the eyes of everyone on us. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Then I stood up. The moment I stood up, a collective gasp rippled through the 300 guests. The air, which had been filled with the gentle strains of the string quartet and the warm afternoon breeze, suddenly became thick and silent. Every head in the backyard turned towards me. I could feel their confusion, their shock, their curiosity like a physical force. Arthur, sitting beside me, went rigid. "Lorraine, what are you doing?" he hissed, his hand grabbing my arm. "Sit down. You're making a scene." I shook his hand off as if it were a venomous snake. I looked past him, my eyes locking onto my son Garrett, who stood at the altar, his face pale but resolute. He knew this was coming. We had planned this. Then I looked at Brenda, whose radiant smile had frozen into a mask of confused horror. "I'm sorry, everyone," I said, my voice clear and surprisingly steady. It carried across the silent lawn. "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe the minister asked if there was any reason why this marriage should not proceed." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in, and I do. "I have a reason." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. I saw Brenda's father, the judge, starting to rise from his seat. A look of thunderous indignation on his face. "Mrs. Carter, what is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "The meaning, Judge Holloway," I said, turning to face him, "is that your daughter is about to marry my son under false pretenses. And I think you and everyone else gathered here today deserves to know the truth." I pulled the small remote control from my purse. It was the remote Beverly had given me. My thumb hovered over the single red button. "The truth?" Arthur sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Lorraine, have you lost your mind? You're embarrassing our son." "No, Arthur," I said, turning my gaze back to him, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "You're the one who has embarrassed our son. You and your mistress." With that, I pressed the button. Behind the altar, the large screen that was supposed to be showing a slideshow of Garrett's baby pictures flickered to life. The first image to appear was a crystal-clear surveillance photo of Arthur and Brenda locked in that passionate kiss in our living room. The one Garrett and I had witnessed just the day before. The crowd erupted. There were shrieks, shouts, people standing up to get a better look. I saw Brenda's mother clutch her chest, her face ashen. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice somehow carrying over the chaos. "You see, this wasn't just a one-time mistake. This has been going on for months." The screen changed. A new photo appeared. Arthur and Brenda entering the Riverside Hotel, the timestamp clearly visible. Then another and another. A collage of their secret meetings, their clandestine lunches, their lies laid bare for all to see. Brenda was stammering, trying to deny it, but her voice was lost in the uproar. Arthur was on his feet shouting, "This is fake. These are photoshopped. Lorraine is having a breakdown." "Am I, Arthur?" I asked calmly. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The screen changed again. This time it showed bank statements. My finger in a close-up photo pointed to the suspicious cash withdrawals. The forged signatures on the 401k loan documents. The receipt from Tiffany & Company for a $15,000 necklace flashed on the screen, followed by a photo of Brenda wearing that very necklace at her bridal shower. The noise from the crowd began to die down, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. This was no longer just a cheating scandal. This was something darker. "My husband has been systematically stealing from our family's retirement savings to finance his affair," I announced. "And his fiancée, the woman about to marry my son, has been busy as well." The next slide showed the evidence of Brenda's embezzlement from her law firm, the fake invoices, the wire transfers. I could see her partners in the fourth row, their faces turning from confusion to pure fury. And then I delivered the final, devastating blow. "But the best part," I said, my voice turning to ice, "the real heart of the deception that has defined my marriage, is that my husband's lies didn't start with Brenda." The DNA test results filled the screen. The words, "probability of paternity 99.999%, displayed in huge letters. Below it was a photo of a pretty, smiling 15-year-old girl. "This is Haley Sterling," I said, my voice shaking with 15 years of repressed pain. "She is Arthur's daughter, a daughter he has kept hidden from me and from his own son for her entire life." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people, staring at the evidence of a betrayal so complete, so devastating that even the most seasoned gossips were rendered speechless. And in that perfect, terrible silence, I watched the world I had known for 25 years burn to the ground. The silence was broken by a single, sharp sob. It came from Brenda, who swayed on her feet, her face a ghastly white against the pure white of her wedding dress. Then she crumpled to the ground in a heap of lace and shattered dreams. That single sound broke the spell. The backyard erupted into chaos. People were shouting, pointing, pulling out their phones to record the disaster. Brenda's mother rushed forward to her fallen daughter, while her father, the judge, just stood there, his face a mask of disbelief and utter humiliation. Arthur was frozen for a moment, his face a kaleidoscope of rage, panic, and dawning horror. He looked from the screen to me, to the stunned faces of his friends and colleagues. He was trapped. There were no lies, no smooth words that could get him out of this. His carefully constructed world had been publicly and irrevocably demolished. Then he did the only thing a coward could do. He ran. He bolted, pushing through the stunned crowd, knocking over a rack of champagne glasses as he scrambled towards the parking area. He was actually trying to flee the scene of his own life's implosion. But Beverly was waiting for him. My sister, still in her catering uniform, stepped up from behind a large oak tree that bordered our property. She was a small woman, but she moved with the confidence of a seasoned cop. As Arthur barreled past, she stuck out her foot. It was a perfectly executed trip. Arthur went down hard, hitting the manicured lawn and skidding a few feet in his expensive wedding suit. "Going somewhere, Arthur?" Beverly asked mildly, strolling over to where he lay sprawled and gasping. By now Garrett had left the altar and was by my side. He put a steadying arm around me. Brenda was back on her feet, supported by her weeping mother, and she was pointing a shaking finger at me. You planned this," she shrieked, her voice raw with hysteria. "You planned this whole thing to ruin my life." "No, Brenda," Garrett said, his voice cold and clear, cutting through her hysterics. "You ruined your own life. You and him." He gestured towards his father, who was now being helped to his feet by Beverly. "Let me go," Arthur demanded, trying to pull his arm from my sister's firm grasp. "Can't do that, Artie," Beverly said, using a childhood nickname that made him flinch. "You see, I'm a licensed private investigator, and I have reason to believe you've committed multiple felonies, including financial fraud. But don't worry, we're not here to talk about you right now." She looked over his shoulder. Two uniformed police officers were walking calmly through the parting crowd. They weren't here for Arthur's fraud. That would be a civil matter for my lawyer to handle. They were here for Brenda. "Brenda Holloway," one of the officers asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Brenda's eyes widened in terror. "No," she whispered. "You are under arrest for suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud," the officer continued as his partner took her arms and smoothly clicked handcuffs onto her wrists. The sound of the handcuffs snapping shut was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I watched Brenda's face crumble as she realized this wasn't just public humiliation. This wasn't just a canceled wedding. This was real. There were going to be real legal consequences. Her life, as she knew it, was over. As the police led a sobbing Brenda away, her parents watched in stunned horror. The photographers, who had been hired to capture a fairy tale, were now capturing the downfall of a prominent family, their flashes popping relentlessly. The crowd was starting to disperse now. Some were leaving quickly, not wanting to be part of the disaster. Others were lingering, whispering in shocked huddles, their phones still held up, recording everything. In the midst of the chaos, I finally felt the strength go out of my legs. Garrett held me up. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. "It's finally over." I looked around at the wreckage of the perfect day I had planned. It was a disaster. It was a nightmare. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. The 3 hours that followed the explosion were a blur of flashing blue lights, hushed conversations, and the slow, painful process of dismantling a wedding that never was. The police took our statements. Brenda was taken away in a squad car, her beautiful wedding dress looking absurd and tragic under the harsh glare of the setting sun. Arthur, after being questioned and released, simply disappeared. He got in his car and drove away without a word to me or to his son. Most of the guests had left, though a few close family members and friends remained, moving through the debris of the reception like ghosts, helping the shocked catering staff clear away the uneaten food and untouched champagne. My sister Beverly stayed, of course, a quiet, solid presence at my side. I finally found Garrett in the kitchen. He was still in his tuxedo, calmly eating a sandwich as if he'd just attended someone else's wedding instead of orchestrating the public destruction of his own. "How are you feeling?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Relieved," he said without a moment's hesitation. He took a bite of his sandwich. "For the first time in months, Mom, I feel like I can breathe." He looked at me, a flicker of the old warmth returning to his eyes. "How are you?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "I think I'm just numb." The next few weeks were a painful and messy ordeal. The story predictably became a local media sensation. Wedding day scandal, fiancé arrested at altar, groom's father implicated in decades of deceit. Our names and faces were everywhere. I stopped answering the phone, stopped leaving the house unless I absolutely had to. My little accounting business suffered. A few long-term clients quietly took their business elsewhere, uncomfortable with the notoriety. The day after the wedding, I did exactly what I had planned. I walked into my lawyer's office, my purse containing the signed divorce papers and the USB drive of evidence, and I filed. With the mountains of proof we had, Arthur didn't even try to fight it. The legal process was swift and brutal. In the settlement, I got the house and a significant portion of his remaining assets as compensation for the fraud he'd committed against our retirement funds. It wasn't a victory. It was restitution. Brenda, facing overwhelming evidence, took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 2 years in a low-security prison and ordered to pay back every penny she had stolen. Her family's reputation was left in tatters. Arthur's downfall was quieter, but no less complete. He lost his job, his reputation, and the respect of everyone he knew. He moved into a small apartment across town and, from what I heard, rarely showed his face in public. But the most complicated part of the aftermath was Haley. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a letter. It was from Victoria Sterling, Haley's mother. It was short and to the point. She apologized for the pain her past relationship with Arthur had caused and said that her daughter Haley had learned the truth from the news reports and wanted to meet Garrett and me. I sat with that letter for 3 days. What was I supposed to do? This girl was the living embodiment of my husband's greatest betrayal. But she was also an innocent. She hadn't asked for any of this. She was my son's sister. I showed the letter to Garrett. He read it, his face grim. "I want to meet her," he said immediately. "She's my sister, Mom. She deserves to know her family, or what's left of it." So, I made the call. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in a town halfway between ours. I was terrified. As we sat waiting for them to arrive, I kept twisting the napkin in my hands into a shredded mess. Then, they walked in. Victoria was a plain, tired-looking woman who seemed to carry the weight of her secrets in the slump of her shoulders. And behind her was Haley. The moment I saw her, my breath caught in my throat. Beverly was right. She had Arthur's eyes, the same dark, intelligent eyes that had first made me fall in love with him all those years ago. She looked scared and uncertain, clutching a book to her chest like a shield. And in that moment, looking at this innocent girl who was a victim in all of this, I knew my anger wasn't with her. It was with him. Always with him. That first meeting with Haley was awkward. Words felt clunky and inadequate. Garrett, bless his heart, did most of the talking. He asked her about school, about the book she was holding, about her life. He didn't ask about Arthur. He just treated her like a person, like a sister he was meeting for the first time. I mostly just watched, trying to reconcile the image of the shy, sweet girl with the monumental lie she represented. Slowly, tentatively, we started to build something new. We met for coffee again, then for lunch. Garrett and Haley started texting, discovering a shared love for old movies and spicy food. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, to hearing about her life. She was bright and funny and kind. She was an innocent soul caught in the wreckage caused by our parents. A year passed. Life settled into a new, unfamiliar rhythm. The divorce was finalized. The media storm died down, replaced by newer, fresher scandals. I poured my energy into rebuilding my business, and slowly my clients started to come back. I sold the big family house with its backyard full of ghosts and bought a smaller, more manageable townhouse for myself. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And it was mine. Garrett, after months of therapy to work through the trauma of the betrayal, was thriving. He'd quit his corporate job and gone back to school to pursue his real passion, landscape architecture. He was designing beautiful spaces, creating order and beauty out of dirt and stone. A fitting metaphor for what he was doing with his own life. He was dating a lovely young woman, a librarian who was kind and genuine and looked at him like he was the only person in the world. And Haley. Haley had become a part of our lives. She would come over for dinner every other Sunday. She and Garrett had developed a real sibling bond, teasing each other and talking for hours. I found myself feeling a fierce, protective love for her. She wasn't a symbol of betrayal anymore. She was just Haley, my son's sister, and in a strange way, a part of my family. One evening, about a year after the wedding that wasn't, I was sitting in the living room of my new home when the doorbell rang. It was Arthur. I hadn't seen him or spoken to him since the day he'd driven away from our ruined reception. He looked diminished, older, grayer, the confident swagger gone, replaced by a deep-seated weariness. He asked if he could come in. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He told me he was in therapy. He said he was trying to understand why he had done the things he had done. He apologized. He said he was sorry for the lies, for the betrayal, for the pain he had caused me, Garrett, and Haley. I listened, and I knew he meant it. But an apology couldn't erase 25 years of deception. "I forgive you, Arthur," I said. And I was surprised to find that I meant it. Not for you, but for me. I can't carry that anger around anymore. It's too heavy. I looked him in the eye. But I will never trust you again. And we can never go back. He nodded, a flicker of tears in his eyes. "I know," he whispered. And then he left. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself thinking about the woman I was a year ago, crouched in the dirt behind the hydrangeas. She was so broken, so lost. I wished I could go back and tell her that it would be okay. That the pain was not the end of the story. The family I had thought I had was a lie. It shattered into a million pieces on that sunny afternoon. But what we built in its place, Garrett, Haley, and me, was smaller, quieter, and imperfect. But it was honest. It was built not on comfortable lies, but on a difficult, painful, and ultimately liberating truth. We had lost everything. But in doing so, we had found something real. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough.